1955, Rear Window. 1956, The Man Who Knew Too Much. Anything to say, Hitchcock?
Well, sir, I admit it ain't a good record, but I'm trying to do better.
Better? Do you call this latest charge doing better? Appearing on television.
In 1960, Alfred Hitchcock shot scenes for Psycho that were so disturbing, even he thought they went too far. A 4-minute shower scene with 70 knife thrusts. Norman Bates talking to corpses in his workshop. A fruit cellar reveal so terrifying it caused heart attacks in test screenings. For decades, these deleted scenes stayed locked away. Until now. This is the story of what Hitchcock didn't want you to see, and why even the Master of Suspense had limits. In 1959, Alfred Hitchcock made a decision that would change movies forever. He bought the rights to a book called Psycho for $9,500. That wasn't much money, even back then. But Hitchcock had a plan. He wanted to make sure no one else could buy the book and ruin the story's surprises. To keep it secret, he even sent his assistant, Peggy Robertson, to buy up copies of the book from stores all over. He wanted as few people as possible to know the shocking twists before the movie came out. Hitchcock wasn't just drawn to the story itself. He saw an opportunity to do something bold. At the time, he was famous for making polished and stylish thrillers. But with Psycho, he wanted to shock people and break the rules of filmmaking. It wasn't just about making a hit. It was about creating something completely new. This gamble paid off, turning his $9,500 investment into a movie that earned over $50 million worldwide. That kind of success was unheard of for such a small-budget film. But making Psycho wasn't easy. When Hitchcock brought the idea to Paramount Pictures, they didn't want it. They thought the story was disgusting and would ruin their reputation. Most directors would have given up, but Hitchcock believed in the project. He even offered to give up his usual $250,000 fee and work for free, just to get the film made. Instead of a paycheck, he asked for a share of the profits. To save money, he also suggested using the crew from his TV show, Alfred Hitchcock Presents. Even with these offers, the studio resisted. They even lied, saying all their sound stages were fully booked. Hitchcock knew they were lying, but instead of getting angry, he came up with a bold solution. He offered to pay for the movie himself if Paramount would agree to release it. By December 1959, Hitchcock and Paramount made a deal. He would finance the movie through his own company, Shamley Productions, with a budget of just $806,947. In exchange, Paramount would get 40% of the profits, while Hitchcock kept 60% ownership of the film. To make this happen, Hitchcock took a big risk. He mortgaged his house and gave up his usual salary, betting everything on the film's success. He also took full creative control, meaning he had the final say on everything. Even the movie's marketing was handled by Hitchcock himself. Instead of paying the actors big salaries, he gave Janet Leigh and Anthony Perkins a share of the profits, which ended up earning them more money in the long run. This deal wasn't just clever, it was revolutionary. It gave directors more power and changed how movies were made. Hitchcock's casting choices were just as smart. He picked Janet Leigh to play Marion Crane, even though she was a big star and usually made $100,000 per movie. Hitchcock offered her only $25,000, but she agreed right away because she wanted to work with him. Leigh's role was shocking. Her character is killed early in the movie, something audiences didn't expect. That twist made her casting even more effective. Hitchcock even played pranks on her during filming, like hiding a scary prop in her dressing room to keep her on edge for her scenes. Leigh's performance earned her awards, but the role wasn't easy. After the movie came out, she received disturbing letters from fans including one so bad that she had to call the FBI. For the role of Norman Bates, Hitchcock chose Anthony Perkins, paying him $40,000. Perkins played Norman as shy and nervous, which made the character's dark side even more shocking. Perkins even added small details, like nervously eating candy corn, to make Norman feel more real. This performance defined Perkins's career and set a new standard for movie villains. The supporting cast was also carefully picked. Vera Miles played Marion's sister, Lila. She had worked with Hitchcock before and was under contract with him, making her an easy choice. John Gavin played Sam Loomis, Marion's boyfriend, though Hitchcock wasn't very impressed with his performance, calling him the Stiff. Martin Balsam played Detective Arbogast, whose investigation keeps the suspense going in the second half of the film. Even the voice of Norman's mother was special. Hitchcock used recordings from 3 different actors to make her sound eerie and unnatural. The Bates Motel and house from Psycho became 2 of the most famous sets in movie history, but they were built quickly and cheaply. The whole thing only took 15 days and cost $15,000. To save money, Hitchcock reused parts of an old set from the 1927 silent film Uncle Tom's Cabin. Universal Studios often recycled sets, but this one turned into a legend. The Bates Motel wasn't even a real, complete building. Only the front office and 2 rooms were built, while the rest was fake. They used smart camera angles to make it look like a full motel. Inside the Bates house, none of the scenes were filmed in the actual structure. Instead, those creepy moments were shot on a soundstage, Stage 28, where Phantom of the Opera had been made years before. Originally, the Bates house and motel were meant to be temporary, just for the film, but they became so iconic that Universal kept them for decades. They showed up in sequels, TV shows like Bates Motel, and became a big draw for studio tours. The set was moved and rebuilt several times, but fans kept coming back to see it. The design of the Bates house wasn't random. It was inspired by Edward Hopper's 1925 painting house by the railroad. The painting shows a lonely old Victorian mansion near train tracks, giving off a feeling of sadness and isolation. Hitchcock later said this painting gave him the idea for the Bates house. His team made the house look exactly as haunting as the one in the painting, putting it on a hill so it would always seem like it was watching over the motel. This wasn't just about looks. The house symbolized loneliness and reflected Norman Bates's disturbed mind. Over time, the Bates house influenced how haunted houses in movies were designed. That same isolated, creepy style can be seen in countless horror films that came after Psycho. Hitchcock was also a master at planning. He carefully mapped out every shot of the film before he even started filming. The shower scene, for example, was only 45 seconds long but took 78 camera setups and 52 cuts to create. Hitchcock worked with Saul Bass, a famous graphic designer, to storyboard the scene in detail. Hitchcock trusted these storyboards so much that he rarely looked through the camera while filming. He already knew exactly how the shot would look. Janet Leigh, who starred in the film, remembered people being amazed by this. When asked, Hitchcock would just say, "I already know what's being filmed." Even the music for the shower scene was planned early. Bernard Herrmann's screeching violin score was written before the scene was filmed. Hitchcock timed every cut to match the music perfectly. This way of combining sound and visuals from the start was groundbreaking. Hitchcock once said that filming Psycho wasn't exciting for him because he had already done all the creative work during planning. He said, "I visualize the movie completely before filming. By the time we shoot, I already know it by heart." This kind of preparation made Psycho the classic it is today. However, the famous shower scene in Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho wasn't always the way people saw it in theaters. Originally, It was much longer and much more shocking. The first version of the scene lasted 4 minutes, compared to the 2-minute version that audiences saw. Hitchcock included things that were far too graphic for the time. For example, there was a close-up of the knife stabbing Marion Crane's stomach, with chocolate syrup used as fake blood spraying out. Another shot showed her dead body leaning against the tiles, her eyes wide open, staring straight at the camera for what felt like forever. There was even a brief shot of her bare chest as she fell from the shower. Hitchcock knew the censors wouldn't allow it, but he added it anyway to distract them from other risky moments. In total, the first cut had 70 knife thrusts, 14 more than what made it into the movie. Hitchcock said he wanted people to feel like they were experiencing every single stab. Although most of this footage was destroyed, a small piece of it showed up at an auction in 1997. Someone bought it for $25,000, but it's never been shown to the public, leaving people wondering just how extreme the original scene was. Hitchcock didn't rely on high-tech effects to make the scene so believable. He used simple but creative tricks. For the blood, he picked Hershey's chocolate syrup because it looked perfect in black and white film. He mixed it with water to get the right thickness, tested over 30 other options, and kept it warm so it would flow naturally on Janet Leigh's body. They used 42 bottles of syrup just for this scene. The sound of the knife stabbing wasn't real. It was actually a knife going into a melon. Hitchcock spent time trying out different melons until he found the one that made the perfect sound. For the famous shot of blood swirling down the drain, they built a special tube to spin the syrup and create the illusion. Even the water on the camera wasn't real. It was just droplets on a clear sheet in front of the lens. Every tiny detail was planned, and the result was so realistic that some people fainted when they saw it. Some shots were still too much for the censors. When Hitchcock first showed the full version, the studio demanded changes. One shot showed the knife entering Marion's stomach, which they said was too graphic. Another showed her body sliding down the wall, leaving a streak of blood. There was even a close-up of Norman Bates wiping blood off his hands. The most controversial shot showed Marion screaming with her tongue sticking out, filmed in slow motion to make it extra disturbing. Hitchcock argued to keep these moments, but he eventually had to cut about 17 seconds. Most of that footage was destroyed, but people still wonder what the full scene looked like. Then, there was a scene of Arbogast's murder. The original scene was much longer, almost 90 seconds more. After the first stab at the top of the stairs, Mother attacked him again and again, stabbing him 15 to 20 times as he fell. The actor, Martin Balsam, had thick stage blood on his face, and hidden blood packets in his shirt burst open to show deep, bloody wounds. Hitchcock made Balsam repeat the scene many times to get all the shots he needed. By the 14th take, Balsam felt sick from falling down the stairs so much. Hitchcock decided to cut most of the shots. He thought the audience would stop feeling scared if the scene was too violent. He only kept 2 or 3 stabs in the final version. For years, no one saw the original footage until 2018, when an old work print was found. The footage couldn't be restored, but it proved how intense the original version was. Test audiences in 1960 had seen the longer scene and didn't like it, which helped Hitchcock decide to make it shorter. One of the most creative parts of this scene was the overhead shot. Hitchcock placed the camera high up near the ceiling to show everything happening but still hide Mother's face. The shot starts wide as Arbogast climbs the stairs and then follows him as he falls. The strange angle made the scene feel even scarier and more shocking. Hitchcock first tried this kind of shot in a silent film back in 1927, but this time he used it perfectly. Hitchcock removed a few shots to keep the scene focused. One shot showed Arbogast's point of view as he fell, with the camera rolling down a chute. People in test screenings felt sick watching it, so Hitchcock took it out. Another removed part showed close-ups of the knife and Mother's hands. Hitchcock thought these cuts made the scene look too messy. He also took out a shot of Mother standing over Arbogast's body, because it gave away too much about the killer. Hitchcock fought to keep one shot in the movie. It showed Arbogast lying dead at the bottom of the stairs. The studio thought it was too gory, but Hitchcock argued it was important. He agreed to shorten the shot from 7 seconds to 4. In the end, this mix of tension, mystery, and horror made the scene unforgettable and proved Hitchcock's genius. Apart from that, Norman Bates, the creepy and complex character from Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, was originally even darker and more disturbing than what audiences saw. Hitchcock filmed several scenes that revealed more about Norman's twisted mind, but most of them were removed to keep the movie within what censors at the time allowed. For example, the infamous peephole scene was originally longer and far more intense. The camera showed Norman's eye in close-up as he watched Marion undress, zooming in on his dilated pupil and twitching eyelid. Then, from Norman's perspective, viewers saw Marion removing her bra and slip in much greater detail. Hitchcock used a special lens to make it look like the audience was spying through the peephole with Norman, making the scene feel even more uncomfortable. This version was too much for censors, so it was cut. Another scene showed Norman in his office arranging stuffed birds. He positioned them so they all faced the bathroom door, creating a chilling connection between his hobby and his obsession with watching Marion. Close-ups of the bird's glassy eyes were meant to mirror Norman's own gaze, making it clear that his taxidermy wasn't just a quirky pastime. These moments hinted at Norman's voyeuristic tendencies in a way that was both unsettling and revealing, but they were deemed too suggestive and didn't make it into the final film. There were also scenes that would have hinted at Norman's fascination with death. One of these happened right after he placed Marion's body in the trunk of her car. He returned to her motel room and carefully picked up her undergarments, smelling them and arranging them on the bed in the shape of a human body. Then, he lay down beside the empty clothes, stroking them gently as if Marion were still there. Another disturbing moment was filmed during the cleanup of the bathroom. Norman found a strand of Marion's hair in the drain, wrapped it around his finger, and placed it in his pocket while quietly humming to himself. Perhaps the most shocking scene Hitchcock filmed but cut showed Norman in his taxidermy workshop talking to his mother. He stroked the feathers of a bird in a way that eerily resembled caressing human skin and said, "You know I'd never touch a live girl, Mother. The dead ones are the only ones who understand me." Even for Hitchcock, this scene was too much, and he decided to leave it out. The dialogue also had to be softened to avoid crossing boundaries. In the parlor scene where Norman and Marion talk, the original script had Norman admitting that his mother told him love was a lie, and that the only real love is between a mother and her son. This line was cut because it made his connection to his mother seem too disturbing. Another moment was altered near the end of the film, where Sam accused Norman of killing Marion. Norman's original reply, "Kill her? She was beautiful. I wanted to preserve her," was flagged as too explicit and removed. Even the psychiatrist's explanation of Norman's condition was toned down. Initially, the doctor explained in detail how Norman's psychosis led to extreme sexual repression, voyeurism, and necrophilia, but this was simplified to avoid overwhelming audiences. By removing these scenes and dialogue, Hitchcock made Norman's character more mysterious and left much of his darkness to the audience's imagination. This actually made Norman scarier because he seemed more real. Instead of being just a monster, he felt like someone who could exist in the real world. Anthony Perkins, the actor who played Norman, later said that these cuts made the character more human, which made him far more terrifying. Now, let's talk about the fruit cellar reveal. Back in December 1959, Hitchcock filmed a longer version of the scene that lasted nearly 90 seconds. The camera was supposed to show close-ups of Mother's mummified body, focusing on her sunken eyes, dry, cracked lips, and leathery skin. Each shot was planned to last around 12 seconds, giving the audience no escape from the disturbing details. The special effects team worked for over a month to create a corpse that looked shockingly real, even adding tiny bits of decayed tissue and hints of insect activity. But it wasn't just the corpse that made the scene terrifying. Hitchcock filmed Lila Crane's reaction for an extra 23 seconds, showing her screaming in pure horror. One scream lasted a full 7 seconds. The scene was also going to include quick flashes of Norman Bates as a child, standing over his mother's fresh corpse. When a test audience watched this version, the reaction was extreme. 14 people fainted, and one even had a heart attack. Paramount Pictures decided it was too intense and told Hitchcock to cut it down. He shortened the scene by 47 seconds, removed the most graphic shots, and dropped the childhood flashbacks. When Psycho hit theaters in 1960, the scene still caused a lot of controversy. In the UK, censors wanted the whole scene removed because they thought it was too shocking. Hitchcock convinced them to keep a shorter version, but 18 seconds of footage was destroyed forever. In the US, funeral directors sued Paramount, saying the scene was disrespectful to the dead. The lawsuit didn't go anywhere, but it brought even more attention to the film. Religious groups also complained. The Catholic Church gave the movie a condemned rating until Hitchcock added a disclaimer saying the movie didn't support the desecration of human remains. This disclaimer appeared in theaters for the first 3 months after the movie's release. One strange thing happened in Kansas, where the film was briefly banned. 3 people claimed they had nightmares and temporary paralysis after watching it, calling it corpse shock syndrome. Psychologists later said it was just mass hysteria, and the ban was lifted. Alfred Hitchcock had a hard time with censors while making Psycho in 1960. From the beginning, the Production Code Administration, PCA, didn't like the script. On September 12, 1959, Jeffrey Sherlock, the head of the PCA, sent Hitchcock a letter calling it unacceptable. He didn't like that the movie showed an unmarried couple in bed, a violent shower murder, and Norman Bates being portrayed as a transvestite. But Hitchcock wasn't discouraged. He came up with clever tricks to deal with this. For example, he added extra shocking things to early versions of the film, knowing censors would reject them. One of these was a shot of Marion Crane's bare backside. When the censors demanded it be cut, Hitchcock pretended to give in. This let him keep the moments he really cared about, like hints of sensuality, untouched. One of his boldest moves happened on February 3, 1960. Hitchcock invited Sherlock to watch the filming of the famous shower scene, but Hitchcock played a trick on him. He filmed an exaggerated version with lots of nudity and blood, knowing it would scare the censor. When Sherlock asked for cuts, Hitchcock acted like he agreed, but instead, he edited the scene to look exactly how he had planned it from the start. The final version lasted only 45 seconds, but it had 78 camera setups and 52 cuts, creating a terrifying moment no one would forget. Hitchcock even did something that had never been allowed in American movies before. He showed a flushing toilet on screen. This might not sound like a big deal now, but in 1960, it was shocking. On March 25, 1960, Hitchcock argued that the flushing toilet was important to the plot because it showed Marion trying to get rid of evidence. The censors allowed it, making this a groundbreaking moment in movie history. It also paved the way for future films to push more boundaries. The black and white filming helped Hitchcock avoid other problems with censors. He decided to film in black and white on October 2, 1959, partly because of budget cuts, but it turned out to be a brilliant choice. For the shower scene, he used chocolate syrup as fake blood. In black and white, it looked real, but in color, it might have been too much. The shadows and high contrast of black and white added to the creepy feeling without needing graphic visuals. Black and white also made risque scenes less shocking. Marion in her bra or Norman spying through a peephole looked less provocative without color. Hitchcock even filmed two versions of the shower scene, one tame for US audiences and a more graphic one for Europe, where censors were more lenient. Because both versions were in black and white, it was easy to swap footage. Hitchcock had another trick up his sleeve. During screenings for the censors on May 25, 1960, he ran the film slightly out of focus. This made it hard for them to spot anything objectionable. This trick worked especially well in black and white because blurry spots were less noticeable. Alfred Hitchcock released Psycho on June 16, 1960, and it became a movie that shocked the world. Hitchcock wanted to keep the movie's secrets hidden, so he came up with smart and unusual ideas. He bought as many copies of the book it was based on as he could, so people wouldn't know the story. He also made a strict rule: no one could come into the theater after the movie started. This rule was brand new at the time and made everyone even more excited to see it. Hitchcock's way of promoting the movie was fun and creative. He appeared in trailers, giving tours of the creepy Bates Motel. The movie posters showed Janet Leigh wearing lingerie, which was very daring for that time. The tagline said it was a new and altogether different screen excitement. To keep things mysterious, Hitchcock didn't let critics see the movie early, so they couldn't spoil it for others. When the movie premiered in New York, Hitchcock added another strange and dramatic idea. He had a nurse in the lobby, just in case people fainted from fear. At first, Psycho only played in two theaters, one in New York and one in Los Angeles. This made people curious and excited before it was released everywhere on September 8, 1960. Hitchcock didn't spend much money on the movie. It cost $806,947 to make, which was very cheap even back then. He saved money by using the crew from his TV show, Alfred Hitchcock Presents. He even gave up his usual payment as a director and chose to own 60% of the movie's profits instead. This decision made him a fortune when the movie became a massive hit. Psycho earned $32 million in its first run in the US, which was an incredible amount for a low-budget black and white movie. To understand how big this was, the movie made 39 times its cost. In today's money, this is about $290 million. The movie also made millions more in other countries, and later re-releases added even more money to its total. Hitchcock's gamble to take a share of the profits instead of a fee paid off. He earned about $15 million, which would be over $135 million today. It became his most profitable movie. The movie's success also changed Hollywood. It showed that even small, bold movies could make a lot of money. Psycho cost much less than huge films like Ben-Hur, but ended up being far more profitable. This encouraged studios to try new ideas, leading to more creative films in the years that followed. When Psycho came out, not everyone loved it. Some critics thought it was too violent or shocking. The New York Times said it looked cheap and lacked the style people expected from Hitchcock. But they praised the acting, especially Anthony Perkins as Norman Bates and Janet Leigh's strong performance. In France, critics were more impressed. They called it one of the best movies of 1960, seeing its brilliance earlier than many Americans. The movie was nominated for 4 Oscars, including Best Director for Hitchcock and Best Supporting Actress for Janet Leigh. But it didn't win any awards, which many now see as a big mistake. Still, Janet Leigh won a Golden Globe, and the movie received a special Edgar Allan Poe Award for its suspenseful story. Over time, people began to realize how important Psycho was. In 1992, it was added to the U.S. National Film Registry for being culturally and historically significant. The American Film Institute named it one of the best movies ever and said Norman Bates was one of the greatest villains in film history. In 2012, Psycho was even called the best movie of all time by a group of experts, beating the longtime favorite Citizen Kane.